Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. As told by Sarah Chin, former night nurse at Willowbrook Extended Care Facility. I worked the night shift at Willowbrook for 3 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. Residents passing away quietly in their sleep, confused patients wandering the halls, the occasional medical emergency, it all became routine. But nothing prepared me for what happened during my final month there. It was a Tuesday night in October, around 2:30 a.m. The autumn wind rattled the windows as I made my rounds through the East Wing. Most of our residents were deep sleepers thanks to their medications, so the halls were typically silent except for the hum of medical equipment and the occasional snore drifting from behind closed doors. Room 237 had been empty for 2 weeks since Mrs. Kowalski passed away. The family was still deciding what to do with her belongings, so the room remained untouched, her photographs still on the nightstand, her reading glasses folded neatly beside the bed, even her knitting basket sitting in the corner chair where she'd left it. As I walked past 237, I heard something that made me freeze in the hallway. The distinct sound of knitting needles clicking together in a steady rhythm. Click, 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 pause. Click, 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 pause. The exact pattern Mrs. Kowalski used to make during her evening routine. I stood there for a full minute, convincing myself it was the building settling or pipes expanding. Old buildings made strange noises, especially at night. But the clicking continued, methodical and purposeful. My hands shook as I pulled out my master key and slowly unlocked the door. The room was dark except for the pale moonlight filtering through the blinds. I reached for the light switch, and that's when I saw her. Mrs. Kowalski sat in her chair, translucent but unmistakably present, her arthritic fingers working the knitting needles with practiced precision. The half-finished scarf she'd been working on before her death now extended several feet longer, the new stitches glowing with an otherworldly luminescence. She looked up at me with cloudy eyes and smiled the same gentle smile she'd given me every night during medication rounds. "Almost finished now, dear," she whispered in her familiar Polish accent. "Just a few more rows." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was seeing. Mrs. Kowalski continued knitting, the needles clicking in that hypnotic rhythm. Click, 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 pause. With each stitch, she seemed to grow more solid, more real, until I could smell her lavender perfume and hear her shallow breathing. "I promised my grandson I'd finish it before winter," she continued, not looking up from her work. "Little Bobby gets so cold walking to school. This will keep him warm." I wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything except stand there watching a dead woman complete her final earthly task. But something in her voice, the same caring tone she'd used when talking about her family, kept me rooted in place. Mrs. Kowalski had been one of our kindest residents, always asking about my studies, always grateful for even the smallest acts of care. "Mrs. Kowalski," I managed to whisper. "You passed away 2 weeks ago." She paused in her knitting and looked at me with such profound sadness that tears sprang to my eyes. "I know, dear. But I couldn't leave, not with Bobby's scarf unfinished. A promise is a promise, especially to a child." The clicking resumed, faster now, more urgent. I watched as the scarf grew longer with each pass of the needles, the ghostly stitches solid and warm-looking. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows more violently. The fluorescent light in the hallway flickered, casting dancing shadows across the room. "How long have you been here?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Every night since I passed," she replied, her fingers never stopping their work. "But only at night when the veil is thinnest. During the day I rest." She held up the scarf, examining her progress. 3 more rows should do it." I don't know how long I stood there watching her work. Time seemed suspended in that moonlit room, the only sound the rhythmic clicking of needles and the whisper of yarn being pulled through stitches. Part of me wanted to document this somehow, to prove I wasn't losing my mind, but a deeper instinct told me this was sacred, a final act of love that shouldn't be disturbed or exploited. When Mrs. Kowalski tied off the final stitch, the clicking stopped. She held up the completed scarf, a beautiful pattern of cables and Celtic knots in deep blue wool. It was the most exquisite piece of knitting I'd ever seen, each stitch perfect despite being created by ghostly hands. "There," she said with deep satisfaction. "Now Bobby will be warm." She folded the scarf carefully and placed it on the nightstand beside her reading glasses. As she did, her form began to fade, starting with her hands and moving up her arms. But her face remained solid until the very end, that gentle smile never wavering. "Thank you for letting me finish, dear," she whispered as the last traces of her presence dissolved into moonbeams. "Tell my family I kept my promise." The room fell silent except for the wind outside. I approached the nightstand with trembling hands and picked up the scarf. It was solid, warm, and beautifully crafted, absolutely real despite its supernatural origin. The wool still held the faint scent of lavender. I contacted Mrs. Kowalski's daughter the next morning and arranged to meet her that afternoon. When I handed her the scarf and explained what had happened, she broke down in tears. Through her sobs, she told me that her mother had been working on that exact scarf for her grandson Bobby, Mrs. Kowalski's great-grandson, but hadn't been able to finish it before her sudden decline. She was so worried about it, her daughter said, clutching the scarf to her chest. Even in her final days, she kept asking if someone would finish Bobby's scarf. She said he needed it for the cold weather coming. Bobby wore that scarf every day that winter. His great-grandmother had kept her promise, reaching across the boundary between life and death to ensure a child she loved would stay warm. I never saw Mrs. Kowalski again, but sometimes, during my remaining nights at Willowbrook, I would hear the faint echo of knitting needles clicking in empty rooms, other residents, perhaps, completing their own unfinished earthly business. I left Willowbrook a month later, but I never forgot Mrs. Kowalski's final act of love. It changed how I viewed death and what lies beyond. Some bonds, I learned, are stronger than the grave, and love truly does transcend all boundaries, even the one between life and death. As told by Marcus Williams, long-haul truck driver. 23 years I've been driving long-haul routes across the country, and I've seen my share of strange things on the road. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened at that rest stop in Nebraska on a foggy November night in 2019. I was hauling electronics from Los Angeles to Chicago, running behind schedule due to a breakdown outside of Denver. By the time I hit central Nebraska, I'd been driving for 13 hours and was legally required to take a rest break. The fog had rolled in thick around 10 p.m., reducing visibility to maybe 50 feet. Every other trucker on the road was pulling over, and I spotted the familiar blue sign for a rest area just ahead. The Platte River Rest Area was nothing special, a standard highway department setup with a small building housing restrooms and vending machines, a few picnic tables, and separate parking areas for cars and trucks. What struck me as odd was how empty it was. Usually, on a night like this, rest stops would be packed with drivers waiting out the weather. But as I pulled my rig into the truck parking area, I counted only 3 other vehicles, 2 passenger cars and 1 other semi. The fog was so thick I could barely make out the building's outline as I walked toward it, my footsteps echoing strangely in the muffled silence. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting shifting shadows on the institutional green walls. The vending machines hummed loudly, but otherwise, the place was dead quiet. I used the facilities and grabbed a coffee from the machine, planning to wait in my cab until the fog lifted enough to drive safely. But as I headed back outside, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Footprints in the thin layer of frost that had formed on the sidewalk. Dozens of them, all leading toward the building but none leading away. I followed the trail with my eyes, my heart pounding. The prints were of different sizes and shoe types. Sneakers, boots, dress shoes, even what looked like bare feet. They all converged on the entrance to the building, as if a crowd of people had walked inside but never left. Yet the building had been empty when I was in there just moments before. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight app, but there was no signal, not unusual for rural areas, but still unsettling. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, pressing in around the rest stop like a living thing. I could hear my own breathing, unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. That's when I heard the voices. They were coming from inside the building, muffled but distinct. Multiple people talking, laughing, even children playing. It sounded like a busy rest stop should sound, filled with travelers taking a break from their journeys. But I had just been inside, and it was completely empty. I approached the building again, moving slowly through the fog. The voices grew louder as I got closer, and I could make out individual conversations. A woman discussing flight delays with someone. A man asking his wife if she needed anything from the vending machine. Kids arguing about who got to pick the next game to play. Through the windows, I could see shadows moving inside, people walking around, sitting at tables, using the facilities. The building that had been empty moments before was now bustling with activity. But here's the thing that really terrified me. All the shadows were wrong. They moved independently of any light source, shifting and flowing like liquid darkness across the walls and floor. I pressed my face to the glass, trying to see inside more clearly, but the figures remained shadowy and indistinct. It was like looking at people through dark water. I could tell they were there, could see them moving and interacting, but couldn't make out any details. The voices continued, normal conversation and laughter that should have been comforting but instead felt deeply wrong. A child's voice, clear and bright, said, "Daddy, why is that man staring at us?" All the voices stopped at once. Complete silence fell over the building, but the shadows continued moving, and now they were all turning toward the window where I stood. Dozens of dark shapes oriented themselves in my direction, and I had the overwhelming sensation of being watched by invisible eyes. I stumbled backward, nearly falling on the icy pavement. The fog swirled around me, thicker now, almost solid. I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. But somehow, I could still see the building clearly, lit from within by those flickering fluorescent lights. That's when the door opened. A shadow figure stepped outside, and I could feel its attention focused entirely on me. It didn't speak, but I heard a voice in my head, not heard but somehow understood. "Why don't you come inside? It's warm in here. Safe." More shadow figures appeared in the doorway, and the mental voice became a chorus. "Come inside. You've been driving so long. You must be tired." And I was tired, bone-deep exhausted from hours of fighting fog and stress. The invitation was tempting, seductive even. Inside looked warm and bright, filled with friendly travelers and the comfort of human companionship. What harm could there be in joining them for a few minutes? I took a step toward the building. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message, the notification sound sharp and jarring in the supernatural silence. The sudden noise broke whatever spell was being woven around me, and I looked down at the screen. It was a message from my dispatcher, weather clearing up ahead. Roads should be good in an hour. When I looked back up, the building was dark and empty again. No shadows, no voices, no welcoming light. Just a standard rest stop facility with flickering fluorescent bulbs and the institutional smell of industrial cleaner. The footprints in the frost were gone, and my own tracks were the only marks on the icy pavement. I ran back to my truck, not caring how it looked, and locked the doors. I sat there for 2 hours with the engine running and the heater on full blast, watching that building through my mirrors. It remained dark and empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside was watching me back, waiting for another opportunity to extend its invitation. When the fog finally lifted enough to drive safely, I pulled out of that rest stop faster than I'd ever moved a fully loaded semi. I drove straight through to Chicago without another break, hopped up on adrenaline and gas station coffee. I reported the incident to my dispatcher and even called the Nebraska Department of Transportation, but they had no record of any unusual activity at the Platte River Rest Area. I looked it up online when I got home. The Platte River Rest Area was built in 1987 on the site of an old truck stop that burned down in 1983. 12 people died in that fire, including 3 children, when they were trapped by smoke and couldn't find the exits in time. The official report blamed faulty wiring and inadequate emergency lighting. I still drive that route several times a year, but I've never stopped at that rest area again. Sometimes, when the fog is thick and I'm feeling particularly tired, I see it in my rearview mirror as I pass by. And sometimes, just for a moment, I can see lights in the windows and shadows moving inside, waiting patiently for the next weary traveler to accept their invitation to come in from the cold. As told by David Park, former security guard at Meridian Office Complex. I took the security job at Meridian Office Complex because it seemed like easy money. 12 hours a night, for nights a week, mostly just walking around an empty building making sure doors were locked and lights were off. The pay was decent, and I figured I could use the quiet time to study for my accounting degree. What I didn't anticipate was discovering that some buildings hold onto the echoes of what happened in them, especially during the darkest hours of the night. Meridian was a 12-story glass and steel tower in downtown Portland, built in the early 1990s. It housed various businesses, law firms, insurance companies, a few tech startups, nothing particularly exciting. During the day, it buzzed with typical office activity, but at night, it transformed into something entirely different. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 10 a.m. The building officially closed at 9 p.m., giving the last stragglers an hour to finish up and leave before I arrived. My responsibilities were straightforward: walk each floor hourly, check all exits and stairwells, monitor the security cameras, and respond to any alarms. The building management company emphasized that I should log everything, no matter how minor. For the first 2 weeks, everything was routine. I'd make my rounds, catch up on reading between patrols, and occasionally deal with a triggered motion sensor when cleaning crews worked late. The building felt exactly like what it was, an empty office space at night, quiet and unremarkable. The first sign something was off came during my 3rd week, around 2 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I was making my hourly rounds on the 7th floor when I heard typing coming from one of the offices. Not unusual by itself. Sometimes people worked late or came in early for important projects. But when I checked the office directory and key log, no one was supposed to be in the building. I approached the office where the sound was coming from, a corner unit belonging to Henderson and Associates, a small accounting firm. The typing was steady and professional, the kind of rhythm that comes from someone who knows their way around a keyboard. Through the frosted glass door, I could see the glow of a computer monitor. I knocked on the door. "Security. Is anyone in there?" The typing stopped immediately. I waited 30 seconds, then used my master key to unlock the door. The office was empty. The computer was off, monitor dark, keyboard untouched. But the desk chair was still spinning slightly, as if someone had just gotten up and walked away. I logged the incident and continued my rounds, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. For the rest of the night, I heard intermittent sounds throughout the building: footsteps in empty corridors, doors closing softly, the occasional murmur of conversation that stopped the moment I investigated. The next night, it got worse. I was reviewing security camera footage from the previous evening when I noticed something strange. The cameras showed me making my rounds, checking offices, investigating the sounds I'd heard. But in several frames, there were additional figures in the background, shadowy shapes that seemed to move independently of any light source, appearing in one shot and vanishing in the next. At 3:17 a.m., while watching the live feed from the 7th floor, I saw a woman in business attire walk past the camera near the elevators. She was there for exactly 3 seconds, clear as day, wearing a navy blue suit and carrying a briefcase. Then she simply faded away, like a television being turned off. I immediately went to the 7th floor. The elevator showed no record of being called to that floor, and my key card was the only one that had accessed the building that night. The hallway was empty, but I could smell perfume, something floral and expensive that lingered in the air like a calling card. Over the following weeks, I began to piece together the building's hidden night shift. The 7th floor seemed to be the epicenter of activity, but strange occurrences happened throughout the building. I'd find conference rooms with chairs arranged as if a meeting had just concluded, coffee cups that were still warm sitting on desks in supposedly empty offices, and elevators that would arrive without being called, their doors opening to reveal nothing but empty space. The most unsettling discovery came when I started researching the building's history. I learned that in 1998, 5 years after the building opened, a woman named Margaret Chen had died of a heart attack while working late on the 7th floor. She was a CPA at Henderson and Associates, known for her dedication to her clients and her habit of staying in the office until the early morning hours during tax season. The official report said she was found at her desk the next morning by a colleague, apparently having worked until she collapsed. But the more I dug, the more I realized Margaret's death was just the first in a pattern. Over the years, 3 other people had died in the building, all from natural causes, all while working late at night, all found at their desks the following morning. I started paying special attention to the offices where these deaths had occurred, and sure enough, those were the locations where I encountered the most activity. The typing sounds, the glowing computer screens, the lingering smell of perfume or coffee, all of it centered around the desks where dedicated employees had literally worked themselves to death. The breakthrough came during my 6th week on the job. I was making my 3 a.m. rounds when I encountered Margaret Chen face to face. She was sitting at her old desk in the Henderson and Associates office, typing steadily on a computer that shouldn't have been working. Unlike the shadowy figures I'd glimpsed on camera, she appeared completely solid and real. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, we stared at each other across the darkened office. She was Asian American, probably in her 40s, with short black hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her navy blue suit was the same one I'd seen in the security footage. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice clear but somehow distant. "I know I shouldn't be here this late, but I have to finish these tax returns. My clients are counting on me." "Ma'am," I said carefully, "the building is closed. You need to leave." She looked confused, glancing around the office as if seeing it for the first time. "Closed? But I have so much work to do. Tax season is almost over, and these returns won't file themselves." She gestured to her computer screen, which showed what looked like a complex tax preparation program. "What year do you think it is?" I asked gently. 1998, she replied without hesitation. April 14th, to be exact. "I have to get these done before the deadline tomorrow." My heart broke for her. Margaret Chen had been so dedicated to her work, so committed to serving her clients, that even death couldn't break her from her routine. She was trapped in an endless loop, forever trying to complete the work she died doing. "Margaret," I said softly, using her name for the first time. "You finished your work. Your clients' returns were filed on time. You did everything you needed to do." She stared at me, confusion clouding her features. "How do you know my name? And how do you know about the returns?" "Because it's 2019, Margaret. You finished your work 21 years ago. Your clients were taken care of. You can rest now." The office fell silent except for the hum of the building's ventilation system. Margaret's hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. Slowly, tears began to form behind her glasses. 21 years, she whispered. "But I remember staying late to finish. I remember feeling so tired, and then—" "You had a heart attack," I said gently. "But not before you completed everything that needed to be done. You were found at your desk, and all your work was saved and filed properly. Your dedication ensured that not a single client missed their deadline." Margaret's form began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. But before she faded entirely, she smiled, the first genuinely peaceful expression I'd seen from any of the building's ghostly inhabitants. "Thank you," she said, her voice growing fainter. "I can finally go home." The computer screen went dark, and Margaret Chen was gone. That night marked a turning point. The building felt different, lighter somehow. While I still occasionally encountered the other nighttime workers who had died in the building, they seemed less frantic, less desperate. One by one, over the remaining months of my employment there, I was able to help them understand that their work was done, their responsibilities fulfilled, and that they could finally rest. I left the security job when I graduated and started my career in accounting. But sometimes, when I'm working late on important deadlines, I think about Margaret and the others who were so dedicated to their work that death couldn't stop them. It's a reminder that while dedication and professionalism are admirable qualities, life, and what comes after, is about more than just the work we do. The Meridian office complex still stands, and as far as I know, the night shift is much quieter now. Sometimes the best part of a security guard's job isn't protecting property from intruders, it's helping lost souls find their way home. As told by Jessica Martinez, pharmaceutical sales representative. I've always considered myself a practical person. I believe in what I can see, touch, and prove. Working in pharmaceutical sales requires a scientific mindset, and I've never been one for ghost stories or supernatural nonsense. That changed completely on a cold February night in 2018 when my car broke down on a remote stretch of highway in rural Michigan. I was driving from Grand Rapids to Detroit after a late client meeting, running behind schedule as usual. The weather had been threatening all day, one of those heavy gray skies that promised snow but hadn't delivered yet. By 9 p.m., I was on a 2-lane highway cutting through farmland and forest, with my GPS showing another hour to go before I reached the interstate. My Honda Accord started making strange noises around mile marker 47. A grinding sound from the engine, followed by a loss of power that had me coasting toward the shoulder. I managed to pull over safely, but when I tried to restart the car, nothing happened. The engine was completely dead, and my cell phone showed no signal. The road was absolutely deserted. In the 30 minutes I sat there trying to get the car started and searching for a phone signal, not a single vehicle passed in either direction. The silence was profound. No traffic, no airplanes overhead, not even the distant hum of civilization. Just the wind through bare trees and the occasional creak of my car's cooling engine. I grabbed my emergency flashlight and stepped outside to check under the hood, though I knew next to nothing about car mechanics. The air was bitter cold, probably in the teens, and the wind cut through my business suit like it was made of tissue paper. Dark clouds had moved in, blocking out the stars and making the night feel oppressive and thick. That's when I saw the light. About half a mile ahead, on my side of the road, a warm yellow glow emanated from what looked like a small building. It was the first sign of civilization I'd seen since leaving the last town 20 miles back. With no other options and the temperature dropping fast, I decided to walk toward the light and see if someone could help me call for a tow truck. The building turned out to be an old-fashioned gas station and general store, the kind you might have seen in the 1950s but rarely encounter anymore. A single island with 2 pumps sat under a small canopy, and the main building had large windows displaying vintage advertisements for Coca-Cola and Lucky Strike cigarettes. Warm light spilled from every window, and I could see people moving around inside. A bell chimed when I pushed open the front door, and the warmth hit me like a physical embrace. The store was exactly what you'd expect from the exterior: wooden floors, shelves stocked with goods, a lunch counter along one wall, and that particular smell of old buildings and coffee that had been brewing too long. "Help you, miss?" The voice belonged to a man behind the counter, probably in his 60s, wearing coveralls and a friendly smile. He had the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life working with his hands. "My car broke down about half a mile back," I explained. "I was hoping I could use your phone to call for help." "Phone's right there on the wall," he said, pointing to an old rotary telephone mounted near the coffee pot. "But you might want to warm up first. Terrible night to be stranded." I thanked him and approached the phone, but when I picked up the receiver, there was no dial tone. The line was completely dead. I jiggled the hook and tried again, but nothing. "Sorry about that," the man said. "Phone lines have been down since the storm last week. We're expecting them to fix it soon, but you know how it is out here in the sticks." I looked around the store more carefully. Despite the warm atmosphere and vintage charm, something felt off. The other customers, a woman examining canned goods, a man reading a newspaper at the lunch counter, a teenage couple sharing a Coke near the window, all seemed frozen in place, going through the motions but not really engaging with their environment. "Is there another phone nearby?" I asked. "Not for miles," the man replied. "But tell you what, my nephew Charlie runs a tow service. He'll be by in the morning to check on us. You could wait here until then. We've got coffee and sandwiches, and it's warm." The offer was tempting. The alternative was walking back to my dead car and trying to stay warm until morning or until another vehicle came by. But something about the situation nagged at me. Why was this place open so late? Where were all the customers coming from on a night when I hadn't seen another car for miles? "What time do you close?" I asked. The man looked puzzled by the question. "Close? We don't really close. Folks need gas and supplies at all hours out here." I decided to test something. I walked over to the woman looking at canned goods and tried to engage her in conversation. "Excuse me, do you know if there's another phone around here?" She turned toward me, and that's when I got my first real shock. Her face was completely blank, not unfriendly, just empty, like a department store mannequin. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. After a moment, she turned back to the cans and resumed her mechanical examination of the labels. My heart started racing. I tried the man at the lunch counter with the same result. He looked at me with vacant eyes, moved his mouth soundlessly, then returned to his newspaper. The teenage couple didn't even acknowledge my presence. I walked back to the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everyone here okay?" They seem unresponsive. The older man smiled that same friendly smile, but now it looked forced, artificial. "They're fine, miss. Just tired. It's been a long day for everyone." "What's your name?" I asked. His smile faltered for just a moment. "Name? Well, folks around here just call me Charlie." "I thought Charlie was your nephew. The one with the tow service." "Did I say nephew? I meant, well, we're all family around here in a way." The warmth I'd felt when entering the store was now oppressive, stifling. The lights seemed too bright, the smiles too fixed, the whole scene too perfect. I realized that in the 20 minutes I'd been inside, none of the customers had moved more than a few feet from their original positions, and none had purchased anything or interacted with each other. "I think I'll go back to my car," I said, moving toward the door. "Wait for help there." "Oh, I wouldn't recommend that, miss," Charlie said, his friendly demeanor slipping further. "It's getting colder out there, and we might have snow. Much safer to wait here with us." As if on cue, the other customers turned to look at me. Their faces were no longer blank. They were pleading, desperate, as if they wanted to communicate something but couldn't. The teenage girl mouthed a single word, "Run." I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but the door seemed to be sealed shut by some invisible force. Charlie was no longer behind the counter. He was standing right behind me, still wearing that awful artificial smile. Now, he said in a voice that was no longer quite human. "No need to rush off. We have everything you need right here. Food, warmth, company. You could stay forever." "Let me out," I demanded, pulling frantically at the door handle. "But why would you want to leave? It's so cold and dark out there. So lonely. Here, you'll never be alone again." The other customers had moved closer, forming a circle around me. Up close, I could see that their eyes were completely black, like pools of oil. They reached toward me with fingers that seemed too long, too pale, too eager. In desperation, I grabbed my heavy flashlight and smashed it against the front window. The glass spiderwebbed but didn't break completely. I hit it again and again until finally it gave way. Cold air rushed in through the opening, and suddenly I could move again. I climbed through the broken window, cutting my hands and legs on the glass, and ran into the night. Behind me, I could hear Charlie calling, "Come back! You'll freeze out there! You need us!" I ran toward my car, stumbling in the darkness, my business heels slipping on the icy road. When I looked back, the gas station was still there, still glowing with warm light, but now I could see its true nature. The building was falling apart, the windows boarded up, the gas pumps rusted and broken. What I had taken for warm light was actually a cold, phosphorescent glow, like the foxfire you sometimes see in swamps. I reached my car and locked the doors, then huddled in the back seat with my coat wrapped around me. I must have dozed off from exhaustion and shock, because the next thing I knew, it was dawn, and a state trooper was knocking on my window. "Having car trouble?" he asked when I rolled down the window. "Officer, thank God," I said. "My car broke down, and I went to that gas station for help, but something was very wrong there. The people weren't normal." He looked in the direction I was pointing, then back at me with concern. "Ma'am, there's no gas station down there. Hasn't been for 40 years. I insisted he drive me down the road to show me what I was talking about. Half a mile ahead, we found the ruins of an old gas station, collapsed roof, broken windows, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. A historical marker by the road explained that the Riverside Gas and General Store had been destroyed in a fire in 1978, killing the owner and 4 customers who had been trapped inside during a late-night ice storm. The trooper arranged for a tow truck, and my car was fixed with a simple battery replacement. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd experienced. I researched the fire and found newspaper accounts that mentioned the victims: Charles Morrison, the 64-year-old owner; Helen Patterson, 42, who had stopped for supplies; Robert Martinez, 55, who had been reading a newspaper while waiting for the storm to pass; and teenage sweethearts Linda and David Thompson, both 17, who had taken shelter from the ice. The descriptions matched exactly the people I had encountered in that impossible gas station. I still drive that route occasionally for work, but I always make sure my car is in perfect condition and my phone is fully charged. I've never seen the ghostly gas station again, but sometimes, on particularly dark and cold nights, I catch a glimpse of warm light in my peripheral vision just beyond the tree line. I never stop to investigate. Some invitations, I've learned, are too dangerous to accept, no matter how appealing they seem when you're cold and alone in the dark. As told by Amanda Foster, former night desk clerk at the Grandview Inn, working the night shift at a small-town hotel teaches you that the hours between midnight and dawn exist in their own strange realm. Regular rules don't seem to apply, and the line between reality and something else becomes thin as tissue paper. I learned this during my 2 years as the night desk clerk at the Grandview Inn, a historic hotel in the mountains of West Virginia that should have been condemned decades ago but somehow kept attracting guests who probably should have stayed somewhere else. The Grandview had been built in 1923 as a luxury resort for wealthy tourists who came to the mountains for clean air and scenic views. By the time I started working there in 2017, it had seen better decades. The carpet was worn thin, the wallpaper peeled in places, and half the lights in the lobby flickered constantly. But it maintained a certain faded grandeur that attracted a steady stream of guests, mostly traveling salespeople, tourists on tight budgets, and the occasional group of paranormal investigators who'd heard rumors about the place. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and for the first few months, it was routine work. Check in late arrivals, handle any guest complaints, make coffee in the morning, and try to stay awake through the long, quiet hours. The hotel rarely filled to capacity, so most nights I had maybe a dozen occupied rooms out of 60 total. The first sign that the Grandview was more than just an aging hotel came during my 4th month on the job. I was doing paperwork around 2 a.m. when the elevator chimed, indicating someone was coming down to the lobby. This wasn't unusual. Guests sometimes needed ice, snacks from the vending machine, or help with some minor issue. The elevator doors opened, but no one stepped out. I waited, watching the brass doors stay open for the full cycle before they closed again. A few minutes later, it happened again. And again. I finally walked over to investigate and noticed that according to the floor indicator above the doors, the elevator was stopping at the 4th floor each time before coming down to the lobby. The 4th floor had been closed for renovations since before I started working there. Water damage from a roof leak had made several rooms uninhabitable, and management had decided to seal off the entire floor rather than pay for proper repairs. The elevator wasn't supposed to stop there at all. We had removed the 4th floor button from the control panel. I called my supervisor, but he just laughed it off as an old building's quirks. "That elevator's been acting up for years," he said. "Don't worry about it unless guests complain." But guests were starting to complain, just not about the elevator. Room 237 called 3 times in 1 week about people walking around upstairs all night. Room 318 reported someone having a party above them. The problem was that all these complaints were about noise coming from the 4th floor, the floor that was supposed to be empty and sealed off. I started paying closer attention during my rounds. Around 3 a.m. each night, I'd hear faint sounds coming from above. Footsteps, muffled conversation, sometimes even music. It sounded like the hotel was hosting some kind of gathering on the forbidden floor, but that was impossible. The stairwell access was locked, and I had the only key. My curiosity finally got the better of me. On a particularly quiet Tuesday night, I took the key to the 4th floor stairwell and decided to investigate. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, each step echoing in the narrow space. The air grew colder as I ascended, and by the time I reached the 4th floor landing, I could see my breath. I unlocked the heavy fire door and stepped into the corridor. The sounds I'd been hearing from below were much clearer now, definitely a party of some kind. Laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses, and what sounded like a jazz band playing softly in the background. Warm light spilled from under several room doors, and I could smell cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. The hallway looked nothing like it should have. Instead of the water-damaged, renovation-torn corridor I'd expected, I saw a beautifully appointed hotel hallway from decades past. The carpet was plush and clean, the wallpaper pristine, and crystal sconces provided elegant lighting. It was as if I'd stepped back in time to the Grandview's golden age. I approached room 423, where the sounds seemed loudest, and knocked softly. The conversation inside stopped immediately, and after a moment, the door opened to reveal a woman in a beaded dress that screamed 1920s fashion. Her dark hair was perfectly finger-waved, and she wore long pearl earrings that caught the light. "Oh," she said, looking surprised. "Are you with the hotel staff? We didn't request anything." Through the open door, I could see into the room, which had been transformed into an elegant party space. Men in tuxedos and women in flapper dresses mingled around a small bar, while a three-piece jazz ensemble played in the corner. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a photograph from the hotel's heyday. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I didn't realize there was an event tonight. I'm the night desk clerk. Is there anything you need?" The woman smiled, but there was something sad in her eyes. "Oh, we have everything we need, dear. We always do. This is our special night after all." "Your special night?" "New Year's Eve, 1929, she said, as if that explained everything. "The most wonderful party the Grandview ever hosted. We couldn't bear to let it end." 1929. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. "Ma'am, it's not 1929. It's 2018. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, her face showed confusion and something that might have been fear. "That can't be right. We just got here. The band is still playing, the champagne is still flowing." She trailed off, looking back into the room where the party continued, seemingly unaware of our conversation. "We were supposed to welcome in the new decade," she whispered, more to herself than to me. 1930 was going to be such a wonderful year. But then the ceiling came down, and the fire started, and... She looked at me with eyes full of ancient sorrow. "We never got to see midnight, did we?" I remembered reading about it in the hotel's history. The New Year's Eve party of 1929, when a section of ceiling collapsed in the fourth-floor ballroom, trapping dozens of guests. The resulting fire had killed 23 people, including most of the hotel's wealthy clientele. It was the beginning of the end for the Grandview's reputation as a luxury destination. "You're all..." I couldn't finish the sentence. "Dead, yes," she said matter-of-factly. "But we're still here, still celebrating, still waiting for midnight to come so we can welcome the future. Except midnight never comes, and the future never arrives." Behind her, the party continued. Couples danced to the jazz music, men discussed business deals that would never be completed, women gossiped about society events that had been cancelled by tragedy. They were trapped in an eternal loop, forever preparing for a midnight that would never strike. "Every night?" I asked. "Every night for... how long has it been?" "Nearly 90 years. She closed her eyes and leaned against the doorframe. 90 years of the same evening, the same conversations, the same songs. Do you know what it's like to be excited about the future for 90 years, only to have that excitement renewed again and again without ever moving forward? Why don't you leave? Move on." "We can't. This was our night, our celebration. We were so happy, so full of hope for what was coming. That joy, that anticipation, it anchors us here. We can't let go of what we thought our futures would be." I spent the next hour talking with various guests at the party. Each one was friendly, engaging, full of plans for the coming decade that had ended before it truly began. They talked about investments they'd make, trips they'd take, children they'd raise, all the dreams that had died with them in 1929. As dawn approached, I felt compelled to return to my desk. The woman in the beaded dress walked me to the stairwell door. "Will you come back?" she asked. "Would you like me to? It gets lonely, repeating the same night over and over. It would be nice to talk to someone who knows what happened after, even if we can't experience it ourselves. I visited the fourth floor several times over the following months. I learned the names and stories of many of the eternal party guests. There was Harold, a young businessman who had planned to propose to his girlfriend at midnight. Margaret, a jazz singer who had been scheduled to perform in New York the following week. Dr. Williams, who had been developing new medical techniques that might have saved countless lives. Each one was trapped not by malice or supernatural forces, but by their own unfulfilled expectations and dreams. They couldn't move on because they were still waiting for their lives to begin, even though their lives had already ended. The saddest part was watching them try to maintain their optimism and joy night after night. They'd gather for the same party, have the same conversations, dance to the same songs, and count down toward a midnight that would reset everything back to the beginning. Their hope was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Eventually, I had to leave the Grandview for a better job opportunity, but I still think about those eternal celebrants. Part of me wonders if they're still there, still waiting for 1930 to arrive, still believing that their best days are just ahead of them. In a way, maybe they're not so different from the rest of us, always planning for a future that might not unfold the way we expect, always believing that our real lives are about to begin. The only difference is that they got frozen in that moment of anticipation, while we get to keep moving forward, even when the future isn't what we hoped it would be. As told by Rachel Thompson, former 911 emergency dispatcher. 5 years working as a 911 dispatcher teaches you to expect anything. Domestic disputes, medical emergencies, car accidents, fires. I thought I'd heard every type of crisis call possible. The training prepares you for the technical aspects of the job, but nothing can prepare you for the emotional weight of being the voice on the other end of the line when someone's world falls apart. What they definitely don't prepare you for are the calls that come from places that shouldn't exist, from people who shouldn't be able to reach you, from situations that challenge everything you believe about the nature of reality. My most disturbing call came during the winter of 2020, on a snowy Thursday night in February. It was around 3:47 a.m., and I was working the graveyard shift at the county dispatch center. These were typically the quietest hours, with most emergency calls coming from bar fights, domestic situations that had escalated, or medical emergencies involving elderly residents. The snowstorm had been going on for hours, keeping most people indoors and reducing our call volume even further. When my console lit up with an incoming 911 call, I answered with my standard greeting, "911, what's your emergency?" What I heard made me immediately check my equipment. The voice was that of a young child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, but the connection was terrible. Heavy static filled the line, and the voice faded in and out like a radio trying to pick up a distant station. "Help us," the child whispered, barely audible through the interference. "Please, we're trapped and it's so cold." "Honey, can you speak louder? I can barely hear you. Where are you located?" "We're in the car," the child said, the signal clearing momentarily. "Mommy won't wake up and my little brother is crying. We went off the road and now we're stuck in the snow." My training kicked in immediately. Motor vehicle accident with possible injuries, potential hypothermia situation, multiple victims including children. This was exactly the kind of call that required fast, coordinated response. "Okay, sweetheart, I'm going to help you," I said, already dispatching emergency units to start searching the area. "Can you tell me where you are? Do you remember what road you were on?" "We were going to Grandma's house," the child replied. "Mommy said we had to hurry because of the storm. She was driving really fast, and then the car started sliding." "Do you know your grandma's address? Or the name of the road you were on?" The static increased, making it even harder to understand the responses. I caught fragments. "Route 34, near the old bridge. Can't feel my fingers." Route 34 was a winding mountain road about 20 miles from the city, notorious for accidents during winter weather. I immediately dispatched paramedics, fire rescue, and state police to begin searching that area. "What's your name, honey?" I asked, trying to keep the child talking while responders were en route. "Emma," came the faint reply. "Emma Morrison. My brother is Tommy. He's only 5. Emma, you're being very brave. Help is coming, okay? I need you to try to keep your brother warm. Are there any blankets in the car? Just Mommy's coat, Emma said. But she's not moving and she feels really cold. I think something's wrong with her. My heart clenched. This sounded like the mother had either been seriously injured in the accident or was suffering from severe hypothermia. Either way, time was critical for all three victims. Emma, I need you to listen very carefully, I said. Try to cover yourself and Tommy with your mommy's coat. Stay as warm as you can. Can you honk the car horn? I tried, but it doesn't work. Nothing works. The lights went out, and the car got really quiet. That suggested the battery was dead, which would explain the poor phone connection. Cell phones often struggle in remote areas during bad weather, and a dying car battery would affect any phone chargers. Are you calling me Emma? Are you using your mommy's phone? There was a long pause, filled only with static. Then Emma's voice returned, sounding confused. I don't know. I just said I needed help, and then you were there. This struck me as odd, but children in traumatic situations often don't think clearly about details. I focused on keeping her calm while our emergency crews searched Route 34. Emma, I need you to try something for me. Can you see anything outside the car? Any lights or signs? It's really dark, she whispered, and the snow is covering the windows. But I think I can see a bridge. A really old bridge with metal things. That would be the Willowbrook Bridge, a Depression-era steel truss bridge that crossed a deep ravine on Route 34. If they'd gone off the road near there, the car could have rolled down into the ravine, making it nearly impossible to spot from the road. I relayed this information to our search teams and stayed on the line with Emma, talking her through basic first aid for her brother and ways to stay warm. But as the conversation continued, details started emerging that made me increasingly uneasy. Emma, what kind of car are you in? I asked. It's blue, she said. Mommy's blue car. She just got it and was really excited to drive it to Grandma's. Do you know what kind of car it is? Like a Honda or Toyota? I don't know cars, Emma said. But Mommy said it was really modern and had all the new safety things. Emma, this might seem like a strange question, but what year is it? 2023, she replied without hesitation. February 15th, 2023. It's supposed to be Tommy's birthday tomorrow, but we're not going to make it to Grandma's for his party. I felt cold dread wash over me. The date she gave was February 15th, 2023, but it was currently February 2020. Emma was claiming to be calling from 3 years in the future. Emma, I said carefully, are you sure about the date? Yes, she said, and now she sounded frustrated. It's 2023. Why do you keep asking weird questions? Please just help us. I signaled my supervisor over and explained the situation. He listened to the call through my headset and frowned. Emergency calls occasionally came from confused or disoriented people who got dates wrong, but Emma's voice was clear and consistent about everything else. Our search teams had been combing Route 34 for over an hour without finding any sign of an accident. No skid marks, no broken guardrails, no vehicle tracks leading off the road. It was as if the car Emma described simply didn't exist. Emma, can you try to turn on the car's hazard lights? I asked. I told you nothing works, she said, and now I could hear tears in her voice. It's getting colder and Tommy stopped crying. That's bad, isn't it? When babies stop crying. Emma, listen to me very carefully. I need you to try to wake your mommy up. Shake her shoulder gently and say her name. I tried that already, Emma said. She won't wake up. And she's getting really cold. Her lips look blue. My supervisor was running Emma's last name through our database. Morrison was a common name in the area, but he was checking for any missing person reports or accident records that might match the situation. Emma, what's your mommy's full name? I asked. Jennifer Morrison, Emma replied. Jennifer Lynn Morrison. She works at the bank in town. My supervisor's expression changed. He wrote something on a piece of paper and slid it over to me. The note read, Jennifer Morrison, age 28, died in car accident February 15, 2020. Route 34 near Willowbrook Bridge. 2 children also killed, Emma, age 8, and Thomas, age 5. February 15, 2020. 3 years ago, almost to the day. I looked at the computer screen showing the current date and time. February 12, 2020, 4:23 a.m. Emma, I said, my voice shaking slightly, I need you to listen to me. The accident you're in, it hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen in 3 days. That doesn't make sense, Emma said. We're stuck right now. We need help right now. Emma, what if I told you that you could prevent the accident? What if your mommy didn't have to drive in the storm? The static on the line increased dramatically, and Emma's voice became more distant. I don't understand. We're already here. We're already trapped. No, you're not trapped yet. Emma, listen carefully. Tell your mommy not to drive to Grandma's house on February 15th. Tell her to wait until the storm passes. Tell her. The line went dead. I immediately called my supervisor over and explained everything. We pulled the records for the Morrison accident from 2020. Jennifer Morrison had been driving her 2 children to a birthday party at her mother's house during a severe snowstorm. She lost control of the vehicle on Route 34 near Willowbrook Bridge, and the car slid through a broken guardrail into the ravine. All 3 victims had died from a combination of trauma and hypothermia. They weren't found until the following morning. The official report noted that Jennifer's cell phone was found at the scene, but it was damaged and showed no record of any outgoing calls. I couldn't stop thinking about the call. Had I really spoken with Emma Morrison, reaching across 3 years of time to call for help that came too late? Or was I losing my mind from stress and too many night shifts? I decided to take action. I looked up Jennifer Morrison's information and discovered she was still alive, still working at the First National Bank downtown. On February 14, 2020, the day before the scheduled accident, I drove to the bank during my lunch break. Jennifer Morrison was exactly as I'd imagined her from Emma's descriptions. Young, professional, with kind eyes and a smile that lit up when she talked about her children. I approached her during her break and told her I was with emergency services. Ms. Morrison, I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to ask you not to drive anywhere tomorrow, especially not to your mother's house. She looked puzzled but not alarmed. I'm sorry, but why would you be concerned about my travel plans? I couldn't very well tell her that her dead daughter had called me from the future, so I improvised. We've had reports of extremely dangerous road conditions on Route 34, especially near the Willowbrook Bridge. Several accidents in that area recently. I'd hate to see you and your children get caught in something preventable. Jennifer's expression grew more serious. That's actually the route I was planning to take to my mother's house tomorrow. It's Tommy's birthday party. Could you postpone the party? Or take a different route? She considered this for a moment. I suppose we could wait until Sunday when the weather's supposed to clear. Mom would understand. I felt a wave of relief. That would be much safer. Jennifer Morrison didn't drive to her mother's house on February 15, 2020. She rescheduled the party for that Sunday, and her children celebrated Tommy's 6th birthday in warmth and safety. As far as I know, she never learned how close she came to a tragedy that had already happened in another timeline. I never received another call from Emma Morrison. Sometimes I wonder if preventing the accident erased that timeline entirely, or if somewhere in the space between moments, a little girl is still trapped in a cold car, calling for help that finally arrived in time. Working as a 911 dispatcher teaches you that emergency calls come from all kinds of impossible places: burning buildings, sinking cars, situations where survival seems unlikely. But sometimes, the most important calls come from places that exist outside of time itself, from people who need help not just to survive, but to never have needed surviving in the first place.